GoForThe2.com, and it's week number 7 of the college football season. I'm going to get into my predictions in a couple of seconds. I just want to remind everybody, this coming Friday on blogtalkradio.com, my show, the NCAA Weekly Blitz Show, I'm going to be joined with my co-host, former Georgia Bulldog wide receiver Corey Allen. We're going to discuss the two big marquee matchups in the SEC this Friday between Florida and LSU, and the 25th ranked Missouri Tigers and the 7th ranked Georgia Bulldogs. You have to check it out. We have a great show planned for you this coming Friday on blogtalkradio.com, the NCAA Weekly Blitz Show this Friday at 6:30 p.m. You have to check it out. Let's get right into the predictions for this coming weekend. Not a lot of great games, but I like a couple of games on Friday night. I'm going to talk about one of them. I like the Temple Owls over Cincinnati on Friday night. When you look at Cincinnati, they're coming off a 26-20 defeat on the road to USF. Not playing very well. The previous week, 2 weeks ago, they did knock off Miami of Ohio 14-0. But Miami of Ohio has one of the worst offenses in the MAC conference. Not playing very well offensively. They started out their season scoring some points in Tommy Tuberville's system, but since Muncie Legault did get hurt with a leg injury, the team has not been the same. I like the way Temple's playing. When you look at what Temple's done, they're 0-5, but they've been in every single ball game. Their defense doesn't give up a lot of big plays. They played some good competition. They lost opening day in South Bend 28-6. Played Notre Dame very tough. They lost a very tough ball game last week to top-ranked Louisville. They lost 30-7, but they're progressing week in and week out. They're getting better. Cincinnati's going in the opposite direction. I'm calling for the upset this coming Friday. Temple picks up their first victory on the road in Cincinnati. I'm calling for a 24-21 victory by the Owls this weekend. How about this game in the Pac-12? Second-ranked Oregon travels in back-to-back road games against Washington. I called for the upset last week from the Huskies on the road in Palo Alto. They lost a very tough ball game, 31-28. They gave up an opening kickoff return for a touchdown. They were down by as much as 10 points in the game, but they battled back. They had an opportunity to pull off the victory in the last drive. They didn't come through, but Washington lost a very tough ball game to a top-ranked defense in Stanford. I look for Washington to rebound. They're coming back home in a very tough environment in Washington. They're opening up a new stadium this year. Going to be very loud for the Oregon Ducks. Oregon making back-to-back road games, and then that defense by the Huskies is very physical. I like the way the defense is playing in the passing defense for Washington. I think they can create some problems for quarterback Marcus Mariota and that offense for Oregon. I think Steve Sarkisian has the team up and ready. Washington could go either way. They're coming off a very emotional defeat. They can come out flat or they can come out mad and hungry. I think they're going to come out pumped up for this ball game. I think Washington gets the victory at home. Their rushing offense led by Bishop Sankey, and that offensive line, that veteran offensive line, they're averaging 258.8 rushing yards per game. They were able to move the ball last week against Stanford. I think they'll be able to move the ball and control the clock against Oregon. I'm calling for the upset at home by Washington. A 35-30 victory over the second-ranked Ducks. I'm still not sold on Oregon. I think their defense is solid, but you can run on them. I like the offensive line by Washington to create some problems. I'm calling for the upset, 35-30 by Washington at home. Let's talk about another matchup right now. Talking about Bowling Green and Mississippi State. Bowling Green has the top-ranked defense in the MAC conference. Bowling Green struggled 3 weeks ago on the road against Indiana, but they've pulled it together. They're a very difficult team to score points on. Mississippi State, they had their opportunity last week against LSU, but in the fourth quarter, they gave it away. They lost a 59-26 victory. That game was a 5-point ball game early in the third quarter. LSU pulled away late, but I like Bowling Green's defense in this matchup. Bowling Green has a very strong rushing attack, a very ball control offense that can keep the ball away from Mississippi State, and I think Bowling Green gets the victory in Starkville. It's not going to be easy, but I like the offense by the Falcons in this matchup, and I am not sold on Tyler Russell or Prescott, the quarterbacks for Mississippi State. Very erratic last week in the second half against LSU. I'm calling for the upset by the Falcons on the road. They pick up a dominating victory in Starkville. I'm calling for a 30-17 victory over the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Let's talk about another game right now. Georgia, Missouri. Georgia limps back home to Athens with major injuries on the offensive side of the ball. Todd Gurley will not play in this game. Keith Marshall, his backup, is out for the season with an ACL injury. Their starting wide receivers, Michael Bennett, has a torn meniscus. He's gone for the season. And their leading receiver heading up into the Tennessee game, Justin Scott Wesley, also tore his ACL. He will not be available. All three of those players, Marshall, Bennett, and Scott Wesley, are out for the year. I'm calling for Georgia, though, to rebound between two freshman running backs. I like J.J. Green and Douglas, the two freshman running backs, led by that veteran offensive line. Missouri can challenge in this ball game. They're 5-0. They're only giving up 22.4 points per game, but I like what Georgia's doing. They have the senior quarterback in Aaron Murray. He's been able to now lead 3 straight victories over South Carolina, LSU, and last week a very gutty performance on the road in Knoxville. I think Georgia's a destined team with or without their stars. I think Georgia dominates at home behind that heavy offensive line. If you watched that matchup last year in Columbia, Missouri, Georgia was able to run at will against the Tigers. I don't see any different in this matchup. I know Missouri's improved, but I like the offensive line by Georgia, a very conservative attack, and I think they run all over the Tigers in Athens. I'm calling for a 34-17 victory by the Bulldogs at home. They get the victory. They get it done. I like another game right now I'm going to talk about. Wisconsin at home facing a very gutty Northwestern Wildcat team. Northwestern almost pulled off the major upset at home against Ohio State last week, but Carlos Hyde was the difference in that matchup. Carlos Hyde had a career-high 168 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. He wore down the Wildcat defense. You're talking about a Wisconsin offense that has a very heavy offensive line and has 3 solid running backs. They're going to be able to use fresh legs and wear down the Wildcats in this matchup. Wildcats coming off a very disappointing emotional home loss. Now they have to get on the road and travel to a very difficult environment in Madison, Wisconsin. Joel Stave, the quarterback for Wisconsin, playing very well within the system. I like the Badgers at home to dominate this matchup. I'm calling for a dominating performance, 38-20 over Northwestern. I think Wisconsin has a very solid rushing attack. They get it done against a worn-down defensive front by Northwestern this weekend. Nebraska, they're 4-1. They're coming off a dominating performance at home over Illinois. I called for the victory last week by the Cornhuskers. They started redshirt freshman Tommy Armstrong Jr. He had a big day. Kellogg, the senior, also got involved in the mix. They picked up a 39-19 victory over Illinois. Now Nebraska heads to Purdue this weekend against a very mediocre team in the Boilermakers. They haven't played very well, but they're under a new head coach in Darrell Hazel, who was the former head coach at Kent State. But at home, they're much improved on the defensive side of the ball. Purdue is giving up on the season 183 rushing yards per game, but at home, they're only giving up 103 rushing yards per game. Also, couple the fact that Nebraska will be making its first road trip on the season with the redshirt freshman quarterback and Tommy Armstrong Jr. I like Purdue to keep this game close. I don't think they pick up the victory, but I think they play Nebraska down to the wire. I think Nebraska picks up the victory, but it is very, very close. A 31-24 victory by the Cornhuskers on the road. It is not easy. They'll score a late touchdown, and Nebraska's pushed to the limit by Purdue this weekend. And one more game that I'm going to talk about. It's a great matchup in Baton Rouge between LSU and Florida. LSU, 2 weeks ago, coming off a very disappointing performance at Athens. They gave up the game at the end of the ball game. Zach Mettenberger couldn't get it done on the last drive. They battled back last week on the road in Starkville. They were up by 5 early in the second half before their wide receivers Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. combined for 16 receptions on the night. Both of those guys are studs, but a Florida defense is very underrated. They're solid against the run. Couple the fact that Florida beat LSU last year in a very tough matchup on the road in the swamp. They were able to wear down that LSU Tiger front with their offensive line. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Florida in this ball game on the road in Baton Rouge, but I think they have the offensive system to challenge LSU in this ball game. I think it'll be a very close ball game. LSU will get the victory, but it will be very, very close. I'm calling for a 24-21 ball game. I think it'll be a lot less scoring than people think. Florida will use a ball control attack, a very run-heavy offense. That's how you defeat LSU. I think they're able to move the ball against a solid LSU Tiger front, but I'm calling for a low-scoring ball game. LSU gets the victory, but it is very close. In Baton Rouge, it's a 3:30 start, 24-21. LSU gets a hard-fought victory. Stay with me all season long. I think it's going to be a great season. I can't wait to give it to you. Stay with me this coming Friday. Corey Allen and I break down the key matchups in the SEC on blogtalkradio.com, the NCAA Weekly Blitz. Check it out.